Hi guys, it's Tomo and Dana. Obviously, I'm Dana. Today, I wanted to talk about why I left America. First, I want to say that all of this is just my personal experience. So, of course, this doesn't apply to every American. To give some background information, I'm from Maine State, and it's very countryside. I do like Maine, but it's a bit boring. When I was 18, I left Maine and I went to Spain and then England for university, and then finally I came back to America and stayed in Boston about 5 years before I came to Japan. So mostly talking about Boston when I talk about why I left America. Number one, everything is expensive. Rent is really expensive in American cities. Compared to Japan, even in the big city, like Tokyo, it's so much more expensive to rent an apartment in Boston. We had a really good deal in Boston for our apartment because our landlord was crazy. But most people pay, one bedroom apartment at least around $2,000 a month. And the apartments are old. You probably are going to have mice. It's not a good deal. It's not good value. So it's also really difficult to find an apartment because there's so much demand and there's not enough supply, to put it simply, because most American cities don't build enough housing. In contrast to Japan, where there's always new apartment buildings going up with a lot of units. For some reason, Americans hate that shit. Homeowners have more control over what their neighbors build. So if you own a house in an American city, you generally don't want apartment buildings to move in next to you because people think it's too many people. There's a lot of classism. They think that poor people are going to move into the neighborhood. And so they try to stop new construction. So basically, that's a big problem in American cities. Also, food is more expensive. If you go out to eat, it's so much more expensive than in Japan. Like a regular meal with drinks in Boston per person is at least $30, at least. And then, you have to tip. It's just very expensive. The other thing that's really expensive in America is healthcare, which, I think most people know about. We basically don't go to the doctor unless we're dying. So it's very different from Japan, where if I have any minor issue, I just go to the doctor and pay like $10. It's so cheap and so convenient. Number two, everything is car-based. If you live in the city, it's really difficult to survive without a car. So public transportation is of course available in the city, but it's not good, it's not reliable. In Boston, all the time the train was delayed, stopped, it's always dirty, there's not as many stations or lines, and it's basically only in the city. You can't really take public transportation outside of the city. There are some long distance train lines, but they're not so convenient. It's not like Japan, where almost every city has more than one train stop. As a pedestrian, it's difficult. All of the streets are based around cars. So a lot of the times there's no sidewalks, which is a problem, especially in Boston winters when there's snowbanks. There's nowhere to walk on the street. You're almost getting hit by cars. And every street in Boston basically has parking. I'm surprised by the difference in Japan. There's no on-street parking for the most part. So you don't have cars taking up public space everywhere, like in American cities. Number three, America can be dangerous. When I lived in Boston, we had a lot of problems with our neighbors. Upstairs neighbors at one point were heroin dealers, and then after they moved out, abusive man and his wife moved in. In both cases, we were often calling the police for dangerous situations, like people doing drugs in the stairway, the man beating up his wife, and that made us a target. Our neighbors knew that it was us calling because it's just obvious by the, they're above us and we're below. At one point, one of the neighbors attacked my boyfriend at the time. Thankfully, he was okay. But that kind of thing made the situation really rough. And I always carried a knife on me at all times for self-defense, but thankfully I never had to use it. But it just didn't feel safe. You know, for example, one time when I was walking to work, I walked past a crime scene of just blood on the ground and crime scene tape because someone had been stabbed, for example. So these kind of things happen, I think, more often in America. Japan is not totally safe, of course, especially as a woman, but it feels safer than America. Number 4, getting a decent job can be difficult, especially in the city. Of course, this isn't everyone's experience, but for me, I went to school for history. I always wanted to be a teacher. So I got my master's in history, and I thought, okay, I should be able to find like a high school teaching position or maybe part-time working at a university, but it was basically impossible. I applied for so many teaching jobs and I never even got a call back. And this is as someone who had basically a perfect academic record, lots of teaching experience already. It didn't matter. You basically need to know someone, and you also need years and years and years of teaching experience in the type of position that you want. So basically, it feels impossible to get into a position in the first place. So it was much easier to get a teaching job in Japan. Of course, they don't pay that great, but to be honest, it's more money than I was making in America with 2 part-time jobs. That's what happens. You graduate with a master's degree and you end up working multiple part-time jobs and a nail salon and a video game store. Of course, part of the error was on my part for getting a degree like history, but it's not a good job market. In my job teaching English to Japanese people, a lot of Japanese people express how much they want to go to America and how great America is. And I think there's some truth to that, but it's so different from my experience of living in America. So I often tell Japanese people that visiting America is probably fun and interesting, but living in America is a totally different experience. So don't let this information stop you from traveling to America and dreaming of studying abroad in America. I still think that that's a great experience, but living in America is, for long term, is different. This video was about why I decided to leave America. Stay tuned, subscribe, and in the future I'll be posting a video about why I decided to move specifically to Japan. Thank you for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to. See you in the next video. Bye.